Welcome to This Week's Truth. I'm John Gordon. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump remaking the U.S. economy. Vladimir Putin might be willing to now come to the table. Russia, the story that just will not go away. And then, of course, there's always Too Late Powell to kick around. We also have two great guests for you. Leslie Corbly, she's an author who's written Progressive Prejudice, and Brian White, who's going to talk to us about everything Tesla. Well, Donald Trump made a visit or invited the American people into the Oval Office once again this week when he met with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. And they announced historic news. First of all, you know that Apple has committed to a $500 billion investment in the United States over the next 4 years. And this week, he upped the ante and said that they were going to invest yet another $100 billion. That brings the total, I can do that math, to $600 billion. Meanwhile, Howard Lutnick reported that tariffs will soon be bringing in $50 billion a year to the U.S. Treasury. This is news of epic proportion, and it is going to be just an unbelievable next 4 years if everything that Trump has worked on comes to fruition, and I believe it will. Here was the president in the Oval Office talking about Apple's investments.
Today, Apple is announcing that it will invest $600 billion, that's with a B, in the United States over the next 4 years. That's $100 billion more than they were originally going to invest. And this is the largest investment Apple has ever made in America and anywhere else. And it's just an honor to have you. As you know, Apple's been an investor in other countries a little bit. I won't say which ones, but a couple. And they're coming home. $600 billion, that's the biggest there is. The company is also unveiling its ambitious new American manufacturing program, which will bring factories and assembly lines across our country all roaring to life. Areas that were not doing so well are doing very well. We have about $17 trillion coming into the United States, which is more than ever before. That's never even come close. There's never been anything like it. Even you, that's even a lot of money for you. But we have commitments of more than $17 trillion. That was as of a couple of weeks ago. These investments will directly create more than 20,000 brand new American jobs and many thousands more at the Apple suppliers like Corning, Broadcom, Texas Instruments, and Samsung, who all deal in that world. As part of this historic commitment, Apple will massively increase spending on its domestic supply chain for the iPhone and will build the largest and most sophisticated smart glass production line in the world in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, which is actually, I did very well there. I like it because I see I did very well there. I did very well in Kentucky, but it's a great place. You're going to be very happy.
Well, Tim Cook then took to the podium and explained that not only was Apple going to invest the $500 billion, but another $100 billion, as I said earlier. But he also explained that this investment has a domino effect where every supplier of Apple is also investing in the United States so that they can feed the supply chain straight into Apple's production. Here's what Tim Cook had to say.
Earlier this year, we made our largest ever spending commitment, $500 billion to the U.S. over the next 4 years. That's already yielding results. Earlier this year, we broke ground on a new factory in Houston to make advanced AI servers. And just last month, the very first test unit rolled off that factory's line, proudly made in America. President Trump shared some kind words about that work, but he also asked us to think about what more we could commit to doing. And Mr. President, we took that challenge very seriously. I'm glad to be here with you today, and I'm very proud to say that today we're committing an additional $100 billion to the United States, bringing our total U.S. investment to $600 billion over the next 4 years. As a part of this, we're launching Apple's American Manufacturing Program. It will spur even more production right here in America for critical components used in Apple products all around the world. And we're thrilled to announce that we've already signed new agreements with 10 companies across America to do just that.
Well, no doubt exciting times lie ahead. The question is now whether too late Powell is going to act before the September Fed meeting, or will he wait until September? I've said all along that I don't think he's going to react before then. It would send a negative signal to the market. If the Fed were to step in now, it would signal that there is trouble. But the fact of the matter is that, as President Trump has been warning, the Fed's action runs the risk of cooling the U.S. economy. That surfaced in last week's job numbers, which actually unemployment ticked up for the first time in many months. And that has led most economists and analysts to predict that the Fed will respond in September with at least a 25 basis point reduction in interest rates. The question is that too little and is it too late? Leading some to believe that maybe he will give us a half a point in interest rate relief. And some people are even calling for a full 1 percentage point reduction in interest rates. It's now anybody's guess. It will depend largely on economic news that develops between now and the September meeting. So there's plenty of time to collect more data. There's plenty of time for this economy to cool. And that's the real concern if by the Fed's delays. It looks like, according to Trump, that Vladimir Putin is willing to come to the table. Here's what President Trump said earlier this week from the Oval Office on the war in Ukraine and Russia.
Did Vladimir Putin make some kind of concession that he hasn't been willing to make before?
I don't call it a breakthrough. I mean, we've been working on this a long time. There are thousands of young people dying, mostly soldiers, but also, missiles being hit into Kiev and other places. But in terms of soldiers, I think Russia's lost over 20,000 since the beginning of the year. 20,000. And I guess the estimate for Ukraine is about 9,000. It's a terrible situation. We want to get it stopped. We don't have American soldiers there, but I feel I have an obligation to get it stopped. This was not my war. This war would have never started, not even a chance. And it didn't start for 4 years. It went 4 years and it didn't start. But this is Biden's war. This was on his watch. And, it's funny. We had no land was taken from Trump. It was taken from Bush. It was taken from Biden. The whole thing they would take from Biden if it weren't for us. But it was taken by Obama. Take a look at what was taken with all of the land that was taken. Nothing was taken by Russia from us. Not 1 ounce of land was taken. I'm here to get the thing over with. Can't answer the question yet. I'll tell you in a matter of weeks, maybe less. But we've made a lot of progress. And as you know, we put a 50% tariff on India on oil. They're the second largest. They're very close to China in terms of the purchase of oil from Russia. But so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But we've had very productive talks today. Yes, ma'am.
So getting this war resolved and ended is one of President Trump's primary policy agenda items. As he has expressed, it has been a frustrating and disappointing process so far. He has great conversations with Vladimir Putin over the phone, and they think that they've got the framework for an agreement. And then hours later, he resumes bombing inside the Ukraine at an ever-escalating level. So President Trump is cautiously optimistic and points to the fact that Putin has reneged and changed his mind in the past. Will he do so again? We just don't know. But it does seem like talks are progressing. Trump is optimistic that they will get together sooner than later, but the details are still in the works. Well, Russia is the story that won't quit. And as you know, Tulsi Gabbard has released documents that provide proof positive that the people who perpetuated the Russia hoax on the American people did so knowingly and dishonestly. They perpetuated a lie that they knew was a lie, yet they forced it on the American people. It really deprived President Trump 3 years of his first administration because he was focused on avoiding impeachment as a result of this false story about Russia interference. So there were so many casualties from the first Russia fraud that was perpetuated on the American people. Steve Bannon went to prison. Peter Navarro went to prison. Roger Stone was raided and was about to go to prison until Donald Trump stepped in and gave him a full pardon. And now we know, proof positive, that it was nothing but a lie. $40 million in a Mueller investigation and an impeachment. And the American people are angry, but they're not the only people that are angry. So is Peter Navarro. And here's what he had to say from the White House lawn earlier this week.
And here's what I want to say. I went to prison, as did Steve Bannon, for defending the Constitution. But there isn't a single person associated with the Russia hoax that's been held accountable. And the list is a long one. It goes Obama, Clinton, FBI Director Comey and other people worked there, like Page and Strzok. It involved the intelligence community and Brennan and Clapper, and the importance of the Durham Annex. The importance of the Durham Annex is that ties it all together and brings also in George Soros and his son Alex and the Open Society Foundation. And this is the most sophisticated political scandal that's ever been engineered. No one's been held accountable. Good for Attorney General Pam Bondi for pursuing that. And the most important thing I can tell you, if people are not held accountable for the Russia hoax, they will do it again. If people are not held accountable, they will do it again. And that's what I'm most concerned about.
So I'm asked a lot about the statute of limitations when I am asked to go on radio shows around the country and provide analysis. And it is my belief and other commentators that the statute of limitations does not run until the conspiracy has drawn to a close. Yet the conspiracy, you could argue, is still ongoing because the conspiratorialists continue to double down that the Russia investigation was legitimate, which is really just a complete crock. But when did the conspiracy end? When did the statute of limitations then begin to run, if it has at all? So I don't think the statute of limitations is going to be an issue. But the venue clearly is a problem. 95% of the people in Washington, D.C. voted for Kamala Harris. They don't like Donald Trump. And that is the logical place as a choice of venue. However, you may recall that Jack Smith decided to indict President Trump in the Southern District of Florida. Well, that kind of paves the way for the Justice Department now to use that same venue as a possible location for an indictment and a prosecution of Obama, Clinton, Clapper, Comey, and who am I leaving out? Clapper, Brennan, and Comey, yeah. Not to mention the FBI agents who were part and parcel of that, like Peter Strzok and his lover, Page. So for sure, there will be a lot of drama to come. But a lot of legal scholars believe that the Southern District of Florida could very well be the site of an indictment and a trial. And if that is the case, we'll be right on top of it because that's where we broadcast from every Saturday from noon to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network and cdm.press. You can also listen to us on our social media platforms, Rumble, Getter, X, YouTube Live, Facebook Live. If you want to follow us right now on Getter, you can come over there. We've got several thousand people interacting with us live on Getter each Saturday. You can come and join us. If you are on Getter, please search for John Gordon Truth and subscribe to our channel. We just need about 35 more people to subscribe, and then we can live stream on our own channel and not be relying on the John Fredericks page, which we love to be on the John Fredericks page, but we'd also like to develop our own presence on Getter if you would be so kind. We would appreciate that little favor. So, will South Florida be the venue? There's a good chance that it will be. 56% of the people in Florida voted for Donald Trump. Well, this week's broadcast was brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They're a restaurant services company located in Atlanta, serving the greater metro area. They have hundreds of restaurants that they look after, providing prompt, efficient, clean, reliable service. And if you're tired of your grease traps not getting serviced, your waste vegetable oil collecting and not getting picked up, and spills of your waste oil, automated attendance, and just lousy service, then look at PCRenergy.com. They have been in business for 15 years providing clean, reliable, consistent service. You can check them out on the web, www.pcrenergy.com. Well, today we've got Brian White. He's coming to you at the bottom of the show, our last hour. And right now we'll get to our first guest, Leslie Corbly, and she has written a compelling book. She's going to be talking about rogue judges as well as the death of feminism. So you'll want to stay tuned for these compelling interviews. Federal court judges continue to act out. Most recently, a federal court judge, Indira Tawani, imposed an injunction for 14 days directing the Department of Health Human Services to take all necessary steps to ensure that Medicaid funding continues to be dispersed. Now, that's in spite of the fact that the big, beautiful bill proposed by the President of the United States and his sponsors in Congress, that was passed by Congress and signed by the President and enacted into law, revoked Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood. So this judge thinks that she knows better than 400 and some odd members of the House, 100 members of the Senate, and the President of the United States. Leslie Corbly, you're not feeling it, are you?
Sure. So no surprise, I guess it's fairly easy to get an injunction, maybe in certain venues for almost anything you want these days. But I don't think that this will stand, and I don't believe it's unconstitutional for Congress to cut Medicaid funding to Planned Parenthood.
Well, I mean, I think they invented the concept of Medicaid. They enacted it into law. It seems that they should be able to prescribe limits to Medicaid, but this judge thinks evidently that she knows better than Congress and the president. I'm just frankly astounded by the activism that judges are invoking and bringing their own bias into their cases. And you should know because you're a lawyer.
Yeah, that's kind of why these kind of things don't surprise me in some ways, Planned Parenthood is an enormous organization, and they have relied heavily on federal dollars for a long time. So I'm not at all surprised that they, want to do a last-ditch effort in order to preserve their funding, and that they, mounted a legal effort to that end. That's really no surprise to me. Now, whether this stands or not, I don't think it. Again, I think it's completely constitutional for Congress to cut Medicaid funding to Planned Parenthood. I think we're obligated on this.
It's going to stand for 14 days because I don't know where you would get emergency relief in less than 2 weeks. Do you think?
I don't. I mean, I certainly personally don't see the grounds here, either personally or professionally. But obviously, again, I'm not shocked that Planned Parenthood mounted a legal battle here in order to try to preserve access to federal funding, just because of how important it is for their operations.
So what does the Department of Health and Human Services do in the meantime?
I suppose in the meantime they have to follow the court order. Although I wonder, I mean, I believe it was just a 2 week injunction, correct?
Yeah, 14 days.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because 2 weeks isn't very long, so I don't know what their cycle is for payments at at the agency, or how it is that they engage in their billing. So I know the Trump administration has already appealed this issue. They're already kind of pushing back on this. So I guess that remains to be seen. I just can't imagine where the justification for emergency relief ongoing would come from. 2 weeks is just not very long as far as keeping pay cycles moving
Well,
along.
and the Supreme Court recently ruled that these district court judges cannot usurp the power of the presidency, and that they cannot issue nationwide injunctions. They just flat out lack the authority and power to do that. But
Sure.
it's not stopping this judgy.
But that's interesting though, because when it comes to nationwide injunctions, that was only related to the parties involved. So since Planned Parenthood is the only party involved and they're a nationwide organization, that's to some degree a little bit of a workaround for that. But as far as the underlying merits of Congress being essentially required to fund Planned Parenthood, I think that that's a really weak argument. That there's some requirement that federal funding has to flow to specific organizations.
So I'm thinking that the administration just says, to heck with you. You can issue all the orders you want. We have a duly enacted law, and we're going to follow the law. If you don't like it, you can appeal to the Supreme Court or to the Court of Appeals. I don't. I mean, that sets up a constitutional crisis, but the courts are begging for it. To me, it seems they are literally begging for a fight. And when I was in law school, we learned a principle called judicial restraint.
Yeah.
They would not typically issue orders that they had no means of enforcing. Yet that does not seem to stop the liberal judges in today's environment.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Again, I really don't think anything should surprise Americans anymore in this realm. Organizations like Planned Parenthood require federal funds in order to operate. It should come as no surprise that they're rather unpleased that those funds have been stopped. And so, I think this is where we are now.
So you, in addition to being an attorney, you're also an author. You've written Progressive Prejudice, Exposing the Devouring Mother.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I understand what a devouring mother is. Can you expose that person to me?
For sure. So the devouring mother think of it as the archetype of pathological or toxic femininity. So we have a lot of those imagery and a lot of ideas of what it looks like to be a bad man, right? But we don't really often talk about what that archetype looks like on the female side. So the devouring mother would be essentially the concept of a mother who, rather than nurturing, uses her authority over children that usually should be put towards nurturing as a way to control and manipulate and serve herself through that, right? So it would be the perversion of caretaking that looks more like control than love.
Well, when does parenting transcend discipline and parenting and being a controlling, devouring mother?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess it can look a lot of different ways, but the clinically, the most common, I guess, manifestation of this would be what's called Munchausen by proxy, which is where the mother invents fictitious disorders of the child so that then she can kind of keep the child in a perpetually infantilized role. So the child never gains the appropriate independence that comes from maternal love and nurture. And so it's interesting, actually, now, I think this is analogous to some degree to the Democratic Party's problems, because I think they embody some of those issues of toxic femininity, right? You think about how the Democratic Party often speaks a lot about their concern for those who are on the margins, those who are disadvantaged or marginalized, and yet often their solution to that is to keep those marginalized away from independence, right? So the idea of those who are marginalized end up being kind of perpetually connected to the government in order to sustain their lives. That's kind of an imagery, I think, for the concept of using love and nurture as a form of control rather than helping the person become independent and capable of leading a stable, successful life on their own. Right. So the devouring mother would be someone who tries to kind of keep her children from ever really leaving the nest.
Are you a mother?
I am. I do. I have one son.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, what was the inspiration for you to write this book?
Sure. So I guess a couple of inspirations. So it's a blend of autobiography and cultural commentary. So I actually had come from a very toxic, abusive relationship with my own mother, and noticed a lot of inconsistencies in our cultural rhetoric while I was growing up. And so one of the first words I remember learning was a word that my mom coined. It was called half aborted, and that's what she would refer to me as. And she was very pro-life, so she wasn't pro-choice by any means, but it did make me think a lot about some of these existential topics, particularly the abortion debate very early on in life. And it really exposed, in my view, a lot of the issues, both ethically and philosophically, with the pro-choice position, because I think it's so inherently anti-child in a way that we don't understand. Not just anti-child in utero, but I think it really puts women in an authority position over children that essentially creates a power dynamic that's really broken, right? This idea that the one person who brought you into this world, who's supposed to love and care for you, has the um, unquestionable right to kill you, I think is a very existential thing for children to hear culturally. And I don't think most people really pause to think about that, because the whole issue is so wrapped up in women's liberation, and it's really framed as a women's issue. And I think it's actually a domestic violence issue, which I think will be increasingly easy to see as more abortions become at-home abortions. So there'll be the likelihood that a child could see their sibling be killed, or witness that in some way that would have been more difficult prior to abortion pills becoming the more common way to end a pregnancy. So at any rate, again, the idea being that there's just a lot of, we don't really, I don't think, have a very child-centered discourse in our culture right now. And I think that's especially true in relation to mothers, because we both revere motherhood, but we also hate it.
So, in parenting your own son, how do you handle these issues? Where do you draw the line between loving and nurturing and disciplining in the event that that little saint of yours should act out or break a rule, or worse, put himself in danger?
I know right now he's 11 months old, so I say he doesn't do anything really wrong yet.
Well, you've got a lot to look forward to.
I know.
As the father of three sons, who all turned out very well.
Yes, I guess my hope is that I can strike a balance between providing him nurture and warmth, but also ensuring that he has sufficient, grounding, that he feels secure in who he is, and secure that he has a safe place to land, but that also it's safe to travel out into the world and make mistakes and, learn and grow, right? I mean, you have to have, I guess, a balance there. And I think that's why it's important for there to be, mothers and fathers. What I do for work is I do fathers' rights for work. So I'm a family law attorney that focuses on fathers' rights. And I do think that again, that aspect of that fatherhood has been lacking in our culture, because we've been so focused on the sort of building up the feminine or women in a way, but I think in a way that's unhealthy to some degree, because fathers are really important. And right now, the rhetoric surrounding fathers is really that you should man up, but only when you're told to, right? I mean, men have no rights to determine whether their children live or die right now. If men who grieve abortions, frankly, have kind of nowhere culturally to turn. It's a very disenfranchised form of pain to have to carry. And essentially they're told, you can't bond with a child until I tell you to. And it's on my terms. And I just don't think that kind of power dynamic is the correct way to go about culturally or socially, because again, the family is involves the mother, the father, and the children. And I don't think saying, women just have this automatic sex-based right to determine who lives and dies is appropriate, nor do I think that embodies equality.
It does appear to be framed that way, doesn't it? When they talk about a woman's right to choose. And I struggle with that. I mean, my retort is, what about the woman's right to choose at the point of conception? There was a decision to be made there. And I think that when you make that decision, you've got to live with the consequences, good or bad, sort of my paradigm. But what about the father? Do they have any right in the case of an unwanted pregnancy, at least by the female member of the union? And then what about the child, the unborn child's rights? Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, it's not just the would-be mother's right to choose. It seems that others might have a voice in this too, even the the entity in this equation that has no voice.
Well, it's fascinating because again, the left focuses so heavily on consent, and there's been a lot of consent-based narratives. But the reality is that, from an existential standpoint of whether you live or die, let's just say that's the question you're asking: Do I want to live or die? Um, the child actually has no consent in that. They had no consent in coming to be. And so I think this idea that you have, this right to extinguish someone else's life, which is what women are told they have. You created a life and you have the right to extinguish it. But there's no similar right to suicide, right? We don't think of suicide as something that someone has an inherent right to. And yet the children born, particularly, I mean, there are plenty of children who, for any number of reasons, would perhaps come of age and say, I really don't want to be here. And I didn't consent to be here. I didn't consent to the terms of this. Why shouldn't I be able to die? And that's considered a mental illness, and I think it should be. To be fair, I'm not saying that we should run around and say people should kill themselves. My point is more that, to your point, that the consent element is really only spoken of in terms of the woman. Everyone else's rights involved here, the fact that they're affected and they are deeply affected by these issues, it tends to be steamrolled by this idea that there's some sacred right of women to control human life, and I think that that's, frankly, a form of perverted femininity. And I do think it's a form of toxic femininity that goes right into that devouring mother, because again, the idea of the devouring mother is one of the reasons the justification psychologically would be that women, kind of the phrase mother knows best. It's just the concept of, if a mother decides to have a baby or not, she always knows best. So she always knows best what to do for the child, how to care for the child. So the idea that the mother saying you deserve to die means the child does deserve to die. And I think it's worth noting that there's a godlike authority involved in this, right? Decisions about life and death of that kind of existential nature were historically that's wrapped up in God, right? That God has the ability and the right to determine who lives and dies because he sees all ends. He's all knowing, he's all powerful. He's particularly all knowing in this scenario, right? To therefore then know what the right outcome is in any given scenario. And the reality is women simply aren't. And yet we give this sort of God-like authority to women culturally, and I don't see any corresponding responsibility or scrutiny applied to that, right? So the whole idea is a woman can choose life or death for the child, and that shouldn't be scrutinized. So I find that I think, very hypocritical and odd. I don't think women have some inherent right to terminate their children that they intentionally brought into the world. Frankly, I think if a man were engaging in this kind of behavior, women would call them barbaric and brutal, right? Like, how dare you choose to create and then destroy what you created? Like, I think that would be inherently easy to see. Like, there's this idea that feminists often put forth that if men could get pregnant, then abortion would be state funded. And maybe that's true. But I think that the reverse is also true. If men were using abortion the way women do now, I think women would call them barbaric. I think they would say that's horrifying. Why would you use violence in that way? Right? That's a very violent thing to do. And so I think that there's just not a lot of scrutiny applied to that issue in particular, and it's viewed too much through the lens of just one perspective. Again, understandably, like, I understand there's all kinds of scenarios where, from a human standpoint, you would understand why a woman would want to abort. But the reality is that there's other interests and other human relatable stories that we don't talk about because they're uncomfortable, and they don't always cast women in a positive light.
So, in your law practice, where you're defending fathers' rights, what kind of issues do you deal with, and where do fathers' rights come into the legal sphere that you deal with?
Oh, sure. So all kinds of issues come into play. It's not uncommon for women to gain sole custody of the children. It's not uncommon for men to end up with minimal parent time. And so there's, I think what we try to do here is to ensure that the father's perspective is put forth, right? And that their rights to have a strong relationship with their child, as strong of a relationship as possible, is present, right? It's often, I think, very easy for the father to be the forgotten one in cases of child custody. And there are obviously cases where that's understandable, right? I mean, some men don't step up. They don't do the right thing. That happens. But it also happens that some men are alienated from their children, and that through no fault of their own, they're kind of cast as the bad person. And it is very easy for the maternal relationship to be the relationship that children automatically view as more comforting, right? So I do think that there's more of a struggle for children to pull away or separate their perspective and identity from their mother than there is their father. And that's understandable because their mother was their first human relationship, right? Your first human relationship is your mother. And so I think it's a very sacred relationship. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's important for the father's role, which comes later, to be secure and protected. You need to ensure that fathers don't lose the relationship with their children, because that is also a sacred role. It's just that the motherly role, I think it's harder for children to inherently separate from their mothers, right? That's who they were initially connected to. So if you have a woman who wants to kind of retain a very enmeshed and emotionally perhaps entrapped relationship with a child, it's, how's the child to know? You know what I mean? Really, the child can't know that. That's a very difficult thing for a child to understand.
So you've written this book. It is called The Progressive Prejudice, and it is about exposing the devouring mother. Is the book out yet?
The book comes out in October. So it comes out October 21st. And again, it's a blend of my own sort of a journey as a child, but that's very much paired with cultural commentary, specifically that critiques heavily the left, because I do think those on the left embody this more toxic femininity issue, right? I think that's just more of their orientation towards the world. And I think you see a lot of it on the left, and it simply goes unexposed because it's a little more covert. It's not as overt as male oppression, which tends to look like, if you've gotten beaten in the face, for example, there's bruises. But one of the things that's really difficult about these more emotional dynamics that happen with I think perverted femininity is that there aren't. So take, for example, the one disorder I gave you, Munchausen by proxy. It's remarkably difficult to mount a case that proves Munchausen by proxy is going on. You have to, have evidence of an enormous number of lies that have been spun over the years. So Gypsy Rose Blanchard is a very famous, good example of what Munchausen by proxy looks like in reality. Now, when you take out the medicalized element, so the element that's physical, and you can have that same structure operating between a mother and a child, but without the physical element, in which case you're not going to have any visual proof. And so it really would be, essentially, the burden is then on the child to understand there's a relational dynamic here that's really broken, that's causing me harm. And that's incredibly difficult. And so I think that, again, I just think that there needs to be an awareness of the fact that these kind of relational problems exist, because I think we tend to deny them as a society because of our gender wars tend to get in the way of understanding that women can do as much harm as men.
Well, thank you, Leslie Corbly, a lawyer, author, and mother. And the book is coming out in October. Where do we find it?
Sure. Amazon's the easiest way to find it. I also have a website, lesliecorbly.com. I have a link there. So you can hop over to the website or go to Amazon, and the book is available for purchase.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck with the book, and thank you for coming on The Truth today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure. It's my pleasure to welcome Brian White back to the show. Brian is an expert on everything Tesla. He has his own podcast called FutureAZA. And of all the people that pontificate and analyze Tesla, it is my considered opinion that Brian has got it nailed the best. Brian, welcome back.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here. There's a lot to cover. There's a lot to analyze, and I can't help myself. I just work on it all day.
I share your enthusiasm. The Tesla diner just opened in Hollywood. Have you had an opportunity to visit it, and what do you think?
I was down there last week, about a week and a half ago now, and it's fantastic. So it's a futuristic looking place. It looks like a big old UFO. And what's interesting is if you own a Tesla, you can go into your car right now, set it as your destination, just even if you're thousands of miles away, and you'll see a little burger icon pop up on your screen. That's your menu. You can order before you get there. Now, right now, advance ordering is turned off because the line is so long when you get there. But you can see the whole menu. You can get anything you want and know exactly what's there. That speeds things up a bit. And then it just goes through whatever payment profile you have on the car. So you don't even have to deal with that. When I went down there, the atmosphere was it was electric. I mean, not to overuse a pun, but there was a lot of people there. There were a lot of fans there. And I had a chance to talk real quick with Franz von Holzhausen, the designer of not just the diner, but most Tesla vehicles. And it was a fantastic experience all around. And the food was fantastic.
The food was good. What kind of food do they serve?
diner food. it is locally sourced, organic, grass-fed beef, whatever. It's all the things that make it fancy, but it's a burger and fries and grilled cheese and a tuna melt and things like that.
But I read where they had hired an executive, world renowned chef. I mean, how good a chef do you need to be able to flop hot dogs and hamburgers? I mean,
Well, they have some in-house homemade sauces that I didn't get a chance to try, but yeah, I don't know. They use, beef tallow instead of partially hydrogenated soybean oil or whatever the rage is for fries. It's not a secret recipe, just use good ingredients. So I'm with you on that one.
so why did Elon decide to open his own diners? What's the idea behind all this?
Sure. Well, it's not even in a place that he lives. LA has a number of locations for both Tesla and SpaceX, but that doesn't mean he's actually the one going there. I don't think it would be safe for him to go to something that public and high profile. It is a halo for the brand. If you think about what a national or international ad campaign costs, it's tens of millions of dollars. You know what's less than tens of millions of dollars? A restaurant that every fan of the company is going to go to, check out, post on social media. People like me going out there making one or two videos. Some people have gone back many times to make more videos, just trying to find a new angle because people find it interesting. They find it exciting. And further, if you've got a humanoid robot in the pipeline that one day, perhaps soon, could do all these kinds of frontline jobs, why not have a test bed, a public facing test bed in which you can test them?
Brilliant. Well, now, isn't part of the concept also that you can go to the diner and charge your car while you eat lunch and watch a movie? So it's less painful than really even having to go to the gas station and fill her up.
Exactly true. There are something like 60, 70 charging stalls at that location. And you plug in. And when you place your order on the screen, you can specify, bring it to my car. And you don't even tell them where you're parked because they know which one you plugged into. So of course you don't have to tell them where you park. That makes sense. And then it there are some very large screens showing movies that you can just watch. And how do you hear them? Well, on the screen, you can just turn it on, and or you can go outside and wander around like a crazy person, like I did.
Well, I am going to visit there in about 2 weeks when my wife and I go to LA to welcome our new grandbaby into the world. We're praying for a healthy, wonderful grandchild. It will be a boy. I'm happy to report. But we're going to cruise through the Tesla diner while we're out there and check it out for ourselves. I'm really looking forward to it. So you say that when you were there, was the Optimus robot serving people food?
Not exactly. It's upstairs. So if you go there, definitely make it a point to get upstairs. There's a little gift shop up there, some patio seating on the roof, but there's also a Optimus that's handing out popcorn to people. And it's very slow. It doesn't walk around, it just stands in one place, scoops the popcorn, hands it to you. You hand it the paper, the little paper cup. It scoops it, hands it to you. And if you give it a thumbs up, it'll give you a thumbs up back or whatever.
So is it the real robot? I mean, is it
Oh, yeah.
actually performing independently of human help or intervention?
So we don't have a direct answer on that, but it is my understanding that it is not autonomous, but teleoperated. And one reason for that would be the safety concern. Now, of course, you brought me on the show because I know a few things. I had a chance to talk with an Optimus engineer, not at the diner, but separately, and I asked, which version of the robot is this? Is this the 3.0 we're going to see? No, it's definitely because 3.0 isn't done. And it's not even the latest version. It's 2.0. We are well into the 2.5 kind of range. We are not going to show the 3.0 until it's ready to deploy because every time Tesla shows their latest and greatest, the competition goes through the footage frame by frame and figures out what the new benchmarks are that they need to hit. So no more secrets. We're just going to show you what we're willing to show you.
The competition would do that because the payoff is actually in the trillions of dollars of everything that I've read about humanoid robots come to become reality.
That's exactly right. If you're it's like in racing, if you can draft behind first place and then dart out and pass them at the last minute, first place is going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the hard work. Robots, we've looked at other technologies before. What if when we got to automobiles, we can replace a lot more expensive transportation, whether it's ships or rail in some cases. You don't have to install a massive rail line, but when it comes to robots, we're talking about replacing all labor. Not all of it immediately. Some of it will be safe for years or decades, especially things like home repair. Um, Expecting a robot to be able to climb through the attic and get new wires put in might be too big of an ask. But there's a lot of jobs that can already be replaced today. Things like things like pick and place in a warehouse. Your job is to pick this up, move it over here. That's your whole job. A robot can do that really well. And when you think of the fact that one robot in your factory is trained for all positions, if someone from packing is out sick and you've got someone from wrapping, they might not know how to do the job, but every bot knows every position. They don't call in sick. They don't need a lunch break. They don't take vacations. They don't have expensive dental plans. It's the market is going to be huge.
And I cannot wait. It is so futuristic and so hard to get your head around. But just think that every person could have their own robot, and the robot could perform simple, menial, repetitive, boring tasks, as well as dangerous tasks or unwanted tasks like mowing the grass. First comes to mind, or washing the dishes. It sounds so exciting to me. I've thought a lot about this, and one of the things that concerns me is that, people, I think, do best when they have a purpose in life, when they feel needed and wanted and necessary. Does the robot have the potential of taking away our purpose?
It has that potential, certainly. If you had asked me this 5 years ago, I would have said all of us will go out and do that thing that we always wanted to do, write the great American novel, start a band, whatever it may be. And then when the lockdown hit, we saw most people just watched Netflix. So that was a little frustrating
Maybe
for.
foretelling, maybe a little bit a view into the future of what life will be with the robot. I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing.
I would agree with you. I think the difference between the lockdown and this situation is we didn't know if the lockdown was ending in a week or two. It
Mhm.
was always 2 more weeks at a time, or maybe a month at most, and then it just stretched on. And I think that created a little bit of a disconnect. I think people need to get their heads around the idea. Talk to someone who has successfully retired, not retired and, lost their purpose, but someone who has found a new and better life in retirement. Those are the kinds of people who can give guidance on what to expect in a world that doesn't have as much time demand.
Well, that would be me. I am supposed to be retired, but at some point along the way, a, a switch got flipped, and I decided that I actually enjoy work. And so I am as busy at my age now of 72 as I was in my 50s or 40s.
Mm.
And I don't want to retire. I personally, um, having purpose is important to me. I don't think the robot is going to replace that. I mean, I don't know. Would the robot sit here and chat it up with you in a year or two and interview for the truth? He might be better at catching you in a lie than I am, but not that you would ever do that. But a couple of our guests may have in the past.
Well, and for that matter, it could just correct poor math on the fly when you're trying to do big numbers in your head. Uh, I think the risk that AI runs with itself is if you look at I'm trying to remember. I think it's Snapchat or Instagram or one of those. But apparently now the feed is just full of AI generated images. And the problem becomes the new AIs are no longer training on the creative works of you and me. They're training on earlier versions of itself that wasn't very good, and perhaps you get into a little bit of an inbreeding situation where the data's no longer, where there's no original spark left. That's something they'll need to worry about. In terms of actually, having a purpose. I mean, I don't do the clean the gutters as often as I should because it's dangerous. It's no fun. But that's something that a robot would be perfectly suited for. Hopefully, we will have an opportunity to ease into this rather than be thrown headlong into a brand new society where if you were out of the country for a few years and came back, you don't even recognize the place. But it's possible.
Well, I've got the sense that we are going to be catapulted into it. I think by the time that Optimus is actually released, it's going to probably, I'm guessing, exceed our expectations on most every level, and that it will happen faster than most people believe. When do you think that we will see the first commercially available Optimus robot, and how do I get my name on the list?
Well, if you look at the robot race, just a few years ago, no one was talking about robots. Tesla held a big day where they announced, we have been working on them for a short time. Here's what we've got. It's not even going to walk. This is a recruiting event. And the criticisms from the media were very loud. They were universally condemning this approach. And then a few weeks later, companies started announcing, well, we're going to look at robots too. And now there are over 150 serious companies looking to make humanoid robots. Some have a lower definition of minimum viable product than what Tesla has. So they have actually started releasing the robots. What can they do? Very, very little and nothing productive. If their objective is to make people come over and look at the booth, they work. But if
Yes.
you need it to actually do something productive that a human would have otherwise done, not so much. So when will we see them deployed in the public? My guess would be by the end of 26 would be the earliest I would expect to see them.
Well, we're late 25,
Yeah, it's
mid
still very
course,
soon.
so mid to late 25. So 26, that's just around the corner.
Yes.
Early or late 26, maybe a year from now.
Yes, yes, I think a year from now is not unreasonable. And the only reason it's as slow as it is because Tesla's definition of minimum viable product is much higher than many other companies. And the unique advantage Tesla has over those other companies is you look at something like Boston Dynamics. They made that brilliant robot Atlas that could do parkour and all kinds of things, but it didn't even have hands.
Yes.
Its job was not to be a useful robot. It wasn't designed in a way that could even be mass produced. Its objective was to raise more money for the company, and it raised more money for the company very successfully.
Well, Atlas has been around a lot longer than Optimus, and
So long.
I view Optimus as about the equivalent of a 2-year-old that can actually walk and walk pretty well with a lot of dexterity. Just imagine what the robot at a 3 or 4 year pace will be. I think it is as exciting as it is a little bit concerning, as I've expressed. But I would never discourage the rapid development and deployment. I think that the benefits far outweigh the downside. And as human beings, we have proven to be pretty adaptable over the several thousands of years that we've roamed the earth. And so I have a sense and the notion that we'll figure out how to retain our usefulness. If no less, nothing other than counting our money.
Well, if you are looking at the various robot companies, the one unique advantage Tesla has is a manufacturing edge. They
Yes.
know how to make products, make them efficiently, get them out the door quickly. A lot of these companies have no experience manufacturing, and as such, they design something that kind of can't be manufactured, not at scale. It can't be serviced, certainly not at scale. So that gives them a tremendous lead over the competition. Tesla showed that what they were doing with the robot was before they built it, they ran it through the crash test simulator, because why wouldn't we? We need to know when it falls over, which parts are going to break, so we don't overbuild it and we don't underbuild it. And I think that was a real wake up call for the competition.
Well, my reference to counting our money is that Musk says that the robot is going to usher in an age of abundance where humans will literally not want for anything.
That's absolutely possible. And if you think about it, so, well, somebody's got to pay for it. Someone's got to pay for it somewhere. I ask why. Well, if you're going to build a building, you need the land. Well, what if the government's just donate a little bit of land for that? Well, then you need the construction material. Well, can't robots make the construction? Can't they do the mining to get the copper for the wires and the steel for the pipes? Can't the robots build the building itself? Why does the building have to cost money in that scenario? There could be an all winners kind of outcome. And but we still need power for it. Okay, let the robots mine the silica to make the solar panels and then install them. The power's right there. So I don't know if that world will happen. I don't know if that world should happen, but the possibility for the first time ever appears on the horizon.
So we know that President Trump and Elon Musk had a falling out of epic proportion. Do you? And I apologize for my phone. We're actually traveling, so I don't have the convenience of a controlled studio. So my apologies for the background noise. The restaurant will just not quit using the blender while I'm doing our interview. Darn them! So Musk and the president had a major league falling out. I was really of the mindset when Musk was at Doge that Tesla would be okay, that everything would stay on track, and that we would be able to see our investment flourish without his help. But darn if things don't seem to have just ignited on fire since he has returned to Tesla full time. Do you have that perception at all?
Absolutely. It was a concern going into it. The president has a very strong personality. Elon Musk has a very strong personality. Those don't always work well together. We've seen it a lot of times throughout history where two alpha males get together and don't get along. And I think it was always a risk. I'm just hopeful that, we're seeing the president want to deorbit satellites that are already deployed because of reasons. I don't understand them, but there's this has not been a good administration for electrification. There was hopes that we would get some regulatory framework surrounding autonomous vehicles at the federal level. That appears to be on hold since the falling out. So in terms of this administration benefiting Tesla, benefiting autonomy, I haven't seen it materialize. It still can. I don't know what the future holds on that front, but it's tricky.
So, Brian, are you inferring that perhaps the Trump administration is acting punitively towards Tesla and Musk at this point? Is that what I'm hearing?
No. The administration is rewarding the fossil fuel guys. The fossil fuel guys have always had a real leg up, and I told people before the election, I don't know if there's an administration even in theory that could address that. You could, if you got someone in who was very far to the left and said, let's do everything we can to harm fossil fuels, Congress and Senate would have to come along, and they wouldn't. We were hopeful that we would get some kind of benefits, and we didn't. And one of Trump's stated objectives was to undo a lot of the Biden era initiatives, a lot of those involved electrification. So those never happened. But it's not punishing Tesla so much as rewarding the other players that are not Tesla. And it's, And then you've got the regulatory framework, which would be an over and above aid for not just Tesla, but other companies as well, that just hasn't materialized.
So I'll give you my 2 cents worth. The world according to John, where Musk and Trump are concerned, and welcome your reaction. You study Tesla. I study politics, probably as many hours as you're looking at Tesla. My sense is a couple of things. One, as much as I love Elon, I think he got confused on what his role was in the White House. He was not elected president. He had a lot to do with it, but that does not give you the license then to insert yourself in policy decisions that you may or may not have a place pontificating or inserting yourself. And I think he probably did cross that line. My in his defense, I think that from an idealistic standpoint, he was absolutely right. The one thing that Trump brings to the equation, he is an incredibly street smart, savvy person, and he lives in a political world. Musk lives in a effectively a dictatorship world where he is the king. His word is the final word. Not so in a political arena where you have to give and take and consider other individuals' desires and needs. I think that's what Trump is able to do with as much skill and deftness as anyone of I've ever seen. He just seems to be incredibly savvy at giving in to the left where we can as needed, but without compromising our values, but still like the big, beautiful bill. I mean, the fact that that got across the line, he didn't get any Democrat votes, but he had to court moderate Republicans. And I think that illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. Musk didn't get that. He wanted to throw in spending cuts in the big, beautiful bill, which probably would have made it dead on arrival, and we would be in a state of utter chaos to this day.
Elon is an engineer at heart. If you talk to other engineers, there's people who say, oh, no, he's just a financier. No, I've talked with engineers who've sat down with him at production meetings at facilities at SpaceX and Tesla. He understands. He's in the weeds. He is an engineer. And the problem with that is what makes a great engineer is not what makes a great politician. Like you just explained, engineering is a digital kind of world. Business can be a digital kind of world, but politics is analog. There's a lot going on there. And I haven't seen examples of people who are good at both. Maybe they exist and I'm just not aware of them, but not, it is not something you can just easily get into and just say my way or the highway, as you know. And I think that was a real problem with the way Doge was executed, was that it didn't leave wiggle room.
Well, I still want Doge to have a role in crafting the future of our federal government. Fraud, abuse, and waste, everybody, no one denies it. And even the people that don't like Doge don't dislike Doge because of its purpose. They just don't like the outcome because they may be the ones that are feeding at the trough, is my guess.
Entirely possible. I know that there were auditors at the Government Accountability Office that were let go, and I don't know how that works with efficiency. I think those would be the first people you'd want to bring in and ask for advice rather than get rid of. It's unclear to me. I don't, the hours that I spend on Tesla instead of politics means that I couldn't possibly follow both. So I will just defer to you on those matters.
Well, I will tell you, I think your choices of spending your time are probably more productive and better than mine. But nevertheless, it's just the way I'm wired. So I'll continue to keep looking at the political landscape. So on electrification and the automobile, again, I think it is back to the art of the practical. While Trump might recognize, to me, the bottom line is the electric car is simply a better mousetrap by any criteria that you choose, unless you just really like a noisy muffler, which some of my neighbors in West Palm Beach seem to absolutely love because they race up and down my street and their cars are making huge amounts of noise pollution. But I guess that Trump also realizes that we've got Detroit and they employ thousands upon thousands of people. If the Biden administration had their way, there would not be a United Auto Workers, I suspect, because there would be no internal combustion engines to build and cars to make. The paradox is that they were incredibly um, supported by the unions and General Motors and um, Mary B.S.
Barra.
Barra, um, who seemed to, she and Biden seemed to have a little love fest. But it's a really high wire act, don't you think? That yes, we want to move into this new technology that clearly is better on every level that you can define, except it would displace hundreds of thousands of workers. So the world, according to John, and maybe Trump, I'm not sure, is that I am perfectly comfortable allowing the market to decide. I don't think we need subsidies. I don't think we want subsidies, but I think that cuts both ways. I don't think that the government should prop up government motors, that's GM, Stellantis, and Ford uh, through subsidies or tax benefits, unless they're going to extend those to electric car companies as well. What's the matter with having a fair, level playing ground, and let the market decide?
The reason, at least in the automotive industry, why the idea of picking winners and losers, a lot of people say we shouldn't be picking winners and losers, but we are. We always are. There are a lot of benefits that go to the extraction, refinement, and delivery of petroleum products that are not extended to electrical products. And there is a finger on the scale. The question is which finger and, which scale, I guess. But what we see with Detroit is they were already making the transition to electric vehicles. There's a Ford electric work van that's made in Kansas City.
Yeah.
There's even Kia is making electric cars in the U.S., in Georgia, I believe. So there
Not to
are.
interrupt you, but just to inject. The problem, though, is that with those Ford electric trucks that you're referring to and the electric cars that GM is doing, they lose money every time they sell one.
So on Ford, at least, I don't believe they're uh, negative on a per unit basis, but the division overall is definitely negative, like into the billions already.
But
And
they got
that
a
is
lot
a
of R and
concern.
D to absorb, in
It is
fairness.
true. But if you look at all manufacturers worldwide making electric cars, there are only about two that have actually found a way to do so while making a profit. And that's Tesla and BYD out of China. But a lot of it is that they're so invested in the R&D to get caught up to where Tesla got to 10 years ago, and it is difficult. Like you said, it is just a better car. It is faster, it is quieter, it is safer. You can fuel up at home instead of standing out in all kinds of weather, in all kinds of perhaps sketchy neighborhoods. It is cheaper per mile. It has got less maintenance. It checks all the boxes. If you tried to invent an internal combustion engine today, you'd be laughed out of the room. It's not as powerful. It's not as safe. It smells bad. Uh,
And it has so many more moving parts than the electric car has. I don't have a
Absolutely.
transmission. I mean, I don't have a catalytic converter or a muffler. I mean, just go down the list. I don't have a fuel injector or a carburetor. I mean, the list is endless. And the thing that just blows me away, I've been driving a long time and I've had a lot of cars. This is the only car I've never taken in to have serviced in its third year. And so I just don't see how anybody could be anything but bullish and excited about the future of electric cars, even though I just lost half of our audience because they turned off the radio. Because I can tell you, there are a lot of people that are in love with their ICE vehicles. But give us a snapshot, if you would, Brian, on where we are with autonomy. To me, it seems to me that the Robotaxi is the ultimate litmus test on whether autonomy is of age and whether it works. Tell us what you think and your observations.
sure. So in the US, there have been a handful of players, literally dozens, whittled down to three. Now it's really down to two. It's just Waymo and Tesla. Waymo is a subsidiary of Google. They've been at this for ages, 15 years really. They first hit the streets in 2012, and they've shown great progress. And if nothing else, they've blazed a regulatory trail that opened the door for other players, including Tesla. Tesla's taken a different approach. It's much simpler. It doesn't have a million fancy, expensive sensors on it that could be prone to failure. And Waymo advocates have said, well, those sensors will get cheaper, and they already have. But Tesla uses a vision approach, 360 vision, just like you and I have, except that we can't see out the back of our heads. It is a car that's paying attention in all directions at all times. And comparing it to Waymo, the accident rate is not higher on Tesla. If anything, it appears lower. The difference is that Tesla gets a ton of coverage for even the slightest anything that happens, even if it's not an accident. It's just, oh, I felt unsafe, makes headline news. There was a crash. Waymo crashed into a fire truck on, it was must have been Monday or Tuesday, did not make the news. I checked the next morning, it was not in the news. That's very strange to me.
I think you're making an excellent case for why we cannot and should not trust the mainstream media. That's why people should come to shows like The Truth, where you can get real, truthful, accurate news.
Well, and it's a huge omission. I'm not calling, CBS a liar for not covering the story, but I'm questioning why. You understand better. Your listeners and viewers understand better. I don't have to tell you, but it is uh, Tesla's approach, vision only, works very well. I was telling your producer before the show, I just did an 1,800-mile road trip to California to go to the diner and back, and it was flawless. I had no interventions. If I had been asleep, it would have done just as well, except that, the car monitors your attention so you don't fall asleep. So that if it's not perfect, you are there to still be in charge. And gosh darn it, it just works.
So where are we in its evolution? We're it seems like we're kind of stuck at level two. What is it going to take to move to level three and then level four and five?
So level 3 is a party trick. They could do it today if they wanted to. Mercedes has already done it. Level 3 means sometimes we'll take liability. Uh, Tesla could do that today on highways with no concern that it's going to crash. The highway driving has been solved for years. But level 4 is the real objective, because once you hit that, your cream turns into butter and it's just ready. It works everywhere. That's the approach they're taking, is rather than try and make a narrow product that just does one thing perfectly and then expand how many things it does, they're trying to make it do everything all at once, so that it will work everywhere. And that approach appears to have worked. In China, they were not allowed to use any training data. They weren't allowed to gather it, they weren't allowed to export it, and they weren't allowed to import their own data center. So when they took the US version of self-driving, when Tesla did that, and trained it for Chinese roads, the video they used to train it was YouTube. They just trained it on publicly available videos. And if you think about that from your perspective as a human, you've never driven in China. You don't know what it's like. But I tell you what, if I sit you down and show you some YouTube videos of what proper behavior is, you can translate all that knowledge you've already accumulated over your life into a safe driving experience in a new country pretty easily. So that's the approach they're taking, is it's thinking. It's actually doing the kind of thing that you and I would do with our brains.
So when do we get to level four?
Well,
That
that's the
which means basically that the car is going to drive itself, and you literally can go to sleep when you're 1,600 mile.
you can go to sleep, you can send it across town to pick someone up, any of that. And the answer is we don't know. It's over the horizon. It could be, Elon has said it could be as early as the end of this year. But Elon says a lot of things. I don't know how much I
What
believe
does
in that.
Brian White say?
I say I don't know. I say I've been wrong before. Um, I say at the earliest, the middle of next year, but it might still be a couple years away.
It is so exciting just to think that there are some things that I think about when I'm using my Tesla with autonomy. You can't call it from more than 100 feet away, and I suspect that that is a challenge. I also wonder when you call it how you get it out of the parking lot and through the gate. I also wonder when I'm going into my house and I'm going through my electric gate and a dog darts out and I have to stop, how's the car going to react? Because the gates are going to close on that car. I wonder how we get all that integration done so that these relatively minor things can be fixed, minor in terms of technology, but major in terms of usability.
Those are all great questions. And I don't know. The real answer is, unlike a lot of earlier versions of self-driving and a lot of the ones written by the competition, those are all made up of if-then statements. They're coded, if you see this, do this. But what Tesla's done is take a neural net approach where they just put all the information in and say, what would you do? And the program looks at it and says, well, here's what I'd do. So the answer to those questions tends to be, what would a human do in that situation? If you're stuck at a light that's not going to change, it might run the light eventually. It might not sit there until the end of time. It might just realize at some point, this light is not going to change. I need to do something else. That's what a human would do. That's what the car will do. So that's our best guess until we get to see all those edge cases individually ourselves.
Fascinating. So, what do you think about the industry as a whole? We know that Waymo and Uber have teamed up. I'm sorry, not Waymo. Well, in a sense, yes.
Yeah.
Waymo, Uber, and Lucid have teamed up and are trying to come up with an autonomous car. I believe an autonomous ride sharing, ride hailing, but I think I read that they were going to produce like 10,000 units over the next year. But Tesla's already got millions of cars, and you can flip a switch and turn them into robotaxis today if Tesla chose to.
So the problem Waymo's having is that their vehicles are too expensive. The current ones, it's a Jaguar I-Pace with $50,000 to $100,000 in sensor. It ends up being $150,000, $200,000 car, where Tesla's approach is going to be $25,000. That's hard to compete with. That's going to add a buck or two a mile to every ride out of the gate. That doesn't make sense. And now partnering with Lucid, that's more expensive. You're going the wrong direction, guys. And then they want to have this little cool Zeekr minivan from China. Still, wrong direction. That's got 100% import tariff. That's going to be an $80,000 vehicle. Even if it already has the sensors, you're still 3 times the price of Tesla's approach. So when it comes to scaling, Waymo plans to add, I think it was 1,000 or 2,000 vehicles all of next year. Tesla could do that this afternoon if they wanted to. How do you compete? And when your vehicle costs less to purchase, costs less to maintain, the advantages are infinite, and the cost comparison becomes absurd. Tesla's going to be able to operate these vehicles for under 50 cents a mile, where Waymo's, I mean, just their cost of acquisition is already over $1 a mile. And that's for all the miles, not just the paid ones. If you're at 50% utilization, a Waymo could cost $3 a mile before you even start using it.
So, what is it going to take to get Tesla momentum back for its shareholders? You know, we've got all these future things that are very exciting and have caused a tremendous increase in the price of the stock. People say, oh, well, the analysts are not viewing Tesla other than as a car company. But the market sure as heck is, because the stock sells at 150 times trailing earnings compared to Ford, GM, and Stellantis, which are about 10 times earnings. So I think the market clearly does recognize the future of Tesla, but the demand has suffered. I don't blame that on Tesla. I blame it on the global economy, frankly. I think all automakers have seen reductions in demand. But what can Tesla do to reclaim its leadership position and get the momentum back in the stock price?
So in the stock, I mean, what you'd need to look at, like you said, the price to earnings ratio is pretty high. What they need is more earnings. Well, there was just a contract signed to sell 300 megapacks to Georgia for their energy storage solutions, their grid scale energy, over 8 different sites. Every one of those megapacks, you see, a megapack, for those who don't know, is just a big old battery. It looks like a shipping container. It's that size, but a little heavier. Every one of those that ships out is $400,000 in profit. Uh, that adds up very quickly. They've got a second factory that makes these in China for the Asian market that is just ramping up now. And they've got a third one that will be opening up in Houston around the end of this year. They've made a deal with LG to provide the batteries for the one in the US. That is going to be a huge, huge segment for Tesla. And then, of course, you've got all the other things, the bots, the autonomy, the FSD for consumers. What they just need to do is wait and see. We need the earnings to increase.
Well, and I certainly personally am very optimistic that they will. But what about the low cost car? I mean, couldn't a Robotaxi serve as the same platform for a much more affordable Tesla electric car?
So that was the plan originally. Development of that program was called the NV91. It was canceled in April of 24. And I've talked with a number of the engineers, and I've talked with engineers outside the company. It's not that simple because it was designed specifically for that. If you add a wheel and just a steering wheel and pedals, seems very straightforward. It is straightforward, but now you're going to need a more powerful motor because they only put about an 85 horsepower motor in it because that's more than enough. You don't want breakneck acceleration. So if you put in a bigger motor, then you need a bigger cooling system, then you need bigger brakes. Everything changes, and what you end up with pretty quickly is a whole new car. So that, unfortunately, as much as you and I would love to see a sporty compact styled after the cyber cab, it's just not going to happen.
Not going to happen. I had concluded that that was just disinformation and that they were really working on it in the back lot and they just didn't want anybody to know. But I take your word, you know better than I do. That is kind of disappointing, frankly.
It is disappointing. And Elon confirmed it on the most recent earnings call. He was asked about it directly and he said, no.
But if you get under $30,000, you open up a huge potential market. That does surprise me that they haven't been able to figure that piece out. Okay, so the cyber truck, or what do we call it? The cyber truck, yeah, the big semi. Where does that stand in its development and market acceptance?
Well, are we talking about the big rig 18-wheeler kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So I've been tracking the progress of that factory. I went down to Reno about a month or two ago and talked with the drone pilot who's out there twice a week. It is a big factory. It's about 1 million square feet. It is all the equipment is being loaded in now. The stamping equipment, the all of the electrification is in. And now what we've seen from the air is that it's not just pickup trucks outside, which means contractors, but now it's a mix of sedans and sports cars too. That means the workers are starting to show up. So they are on pace to enter production at the end of this year. So in the next 6 months or into early in the first quarter. These are going to be ridiculous. These are going to be amazing. They've already set up along the southern part of mostly along the East Coast, but across country, a belt of public chargers for the semis. It's very difficult to make them. You have to get special transformers, you have to pipe in the power yourself, basically, because of how much juice it takes to run an entire truck stop. But these are absolutely happening. And then the second part of that equation is those are going to be autonomous before too long as well. So you're not just getting a truck that's cheaper to operate, cheaper to own, less maintenance. It's not going to have a driver. That's one of your bigger expenses. So that's we'll start seeing those more on the road by next year.
How is the prototype gone with Pepsi? Didn't they buy 100 of the big rigs?
No, it was more like 20. It was originally about a dozen. They've expanded it to about 20, but Pepsi is all on board. They are building their own charging station. They've got permits to get them charging at several different hubs. So if you want to move potato chips, that's very easy. It's, oh, well, if you can only move potato chips, well, they also move Pepsi products, which are quite heavy. Liquid, as you know, quite heavy. So this is a product that works. Pepsi's excited. They're expanding. Other trucks have gone out for pilot programs at Walmart, Costco, and a number of trucking companies, Saya being one. So these companies are on board. They just are waiting to get them. And what we don't know yet is what the actual price is going to be. Because when it comes to a business, I've seen people say, oh, no one's going to buy the semi is a failure because no one will buy it because people hate Tesla. And I say, people hate Walmart, and Walmart puts their logo on the side of the semis. It doesn't hurt them, it helps them. And when it comes to a business, I think you'll agree, it's the dollars and cents that matter. If I love it, but it's too expensive, it doesn't matter that I love it. If I hate it, if it's the ugliest truck in the world, but it costs half as much to operate, it's going to be the biggest seller. So that's where we're at. Is
And let's don't forget the safety. I mean, which would you rather be? Would you rather be on, what is it, I-10 from Denver to Vail in a snowstorm and a blizzard with an autonomous truck or a human driven truck? I'm not sure right now.
Yeah, the reality is, humans like to speed. The Tesla Semi doesn't need to do that. It's not in a hurry. It's not trying to get in before its 10 hours of legally allowable time is up. In fact, it can, if it is autonomous, what it can do is say, look, the charger 3 hours from now is a little bit congested. I'm going to take my speed from 65 down to 62 so I come in 15 minutes later and miss the rush. And I'm going to use less juice getting there. That's all and you and I, as consumers, as other drivers, would never even notice this shift. It all happened behind the scenes.
It's amazing. Brian White, FutureAZA, I'm into this stuff, and you make it so exciting, and you have got such a command of the subject. Thank you so much for your generosity of time and knowledge. You're welcome back here anytime. Brian White, thank you for coming on The Truth today.
Thank you, John.
Have a good rest of your weekend.
You too.
Elon Musk wants to start a new third party in the United States called the America Party. Maybe he got the idea from Evan Jaqua, who wants to start the Solutions Party. Evan, welcome to The Truth.
It's an honor to be here, John. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So you're an international business development specialist and have lived all over the globe. And I take it that you got your inspiration from talking to people in foreign countries, and you found that they share a lot of the same frustrations and beliefs that you do.
Exactly. Exactly, John. Whether we're talking, I lived, as I might have mentioned earlier, in communist China. I lived in Japan many years. I actually got my master's degree in Japan in AI, believe it or not, or computer science. And so we can talk about AI too at some point if you'd like. And then I've been spending most of the last 20 years in South America. And the common problem that has come up, and I think it's very evident we have it here, is it all really comes down to our politicians, and specifically um, uh, how, the human brain is a great thing, but part of the problem with human brain is we get addicted to things very easily, and power is probably the most addictive thing of all. And once people get it, they won't give it up. It becomes the priority. And that's what we're seeing, I think, very clearly in Washington. Our politicians put their own political careers ahead of everything. And because of that, they form alliances, these sort of perverse symbiotic relationships with special interests. And, I don't think things are really going to improve as long as our politicians put their own political careers and their own reelection ahead of everything else, along with their own partisan interests. If I were a doctor and I had to prescribe to you a very addictive medicine, what would probably be the best way to keep you from getting addicted to it? Well, I would give you small doses spread apart. And that's exactly how power has to be allocated, in small doses spread apart. And so that's why the most fundamental idea is not only ending re-election, but only making um, elected office one term. In other words, you cannot even run for one other term or another term, or you can't even run for another office while you're serving. Because if, for example, if somebody can run for another office while they're serving, that's going to skew their decision making. That's going to skew how they behave in office. So we want them concentrating 100% on what they were elected to do, and then moving on. The message is basic. Message is basically this: you have one opportunity to make your mark in history. Don't blow it, and don't be there for self-serving purposes.
Well, when I was a little boy, a long,
Mm-hmm.
long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
it was my distinct recollection that people who served in public office typically had had a full career and a successful career in business or perhaps the religious field or academia, and they
Mm-hmm.
would run for public office and they would be elected as a sign of respect and appreciation for what they had accomplished in their career. And they weren't expected to stay there long, maybe 2 or 3 terms. That seems to have changed dramatically, in that now we have professional politicians who just continue to run for the next higher up office that they can aspire to, and they become permanent fixtures of the political uh, operation and the establishment. I don't think that's for the better.
I don't either. I completely agree. And in fact, that's why I say I don't even think you should be allowed to run for a second term or a third term. I think it should just be one term. And then after a waiting period of, say, 2 years, you can run for another office, but it can never be for the same office.
Well, the system is designed to reward just the opposite. I mean, you can't accomplish much at all in Congress until you've been there 10 years and you become a member of the leadership, don't you think? And is there
Well,
an
yeah,
argument to be made that experience is a relevant criteria for future service?
yeah, but I think we have to ask ourselves, what are our career politicians experienced at? They're experienced in spending half their time working on their reelection. Uh,
Fundraising.
yeah, fundraising and participating in partisan events. They're experienced at giving non-answers when they're asked questions. They're experienced at supporting special interests, the special interests that help keep them in office. That's why incumbents have a 95% reelection rate. And so
99, if I'm not
okay,
mistaken.
okay.
I think it's higher than 95, somewhere north of 95.
Well, I said 95 as a conservative number,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
so
it varies
and
over
so
state and federal.
and so yeah, what are they experienced at? Well, they're experienced at being politicians.
Mhm.
William Buckley, the conservative commentator, once said that he'd rather have 2,000 people randomly selected from the Boston phone book serving as opposed to career politicians. And I actually agree with that. I think
I
that
do too.
our Congress will be much more effective when you're getting fresh blood in there and people who are eager to get things done and not just doing what they have to get reelected. I mean, let's look at our Congress, how compliant they are, whether we're talking Democrat or Republican. They just basically, nobody wants to get primary. That's like the ultimate nightmare. And so they do what they have to. There's no independent thinking. It's just go along, to get along.
My question is, we continue to pass exorbitant spending bills, one after another, and it's been happening for 20 years. And
Right.
every time I think that we've reached a new plateau, that we come along and we up the ante and we pass a new spending bill. My question is, who is the puppet master? Where
Mm-hmm.
is this impetus for irrational, irresponsible government spending coming from? Who is it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the thing is when we're basically writing a lot of hot checks every year, and it's like if you had a neighbor, suppose you had a neighbor who was living high on the hog on credit cards, and if you asked them, well, what are you going to do about all this stuff, and they said, well, I'm just going to send it to my kids or my grandkids at some point, you would think, gosh, what a loser. But that's exactly what we're doing right now. Now, I think that the national debt needs to be addressed. As long as our politicians are being rewarded for this behavior, as long as they're getting reelected and they're being rewarded for this irresponsible spending, it's not going to change.
You think it's the politicians, or do you think maybe we got to take a long look in the mirror? I've never gotten any government subsistence
Hmm.
except during COVID, and
Hmm.
I got my COVID check, and
Hmm.
man, it tasted good. And then in my business, I had two businesses, and so I got two funding sources for my business in the form of the
Hmm.
PPP program, and man, those chickens tasted even better. So I'm just wondering, but I haven't applied for anything else. I don't seek anything else. But I wonder if instead of looking outwardly at the politicians, we may need to do some self reflection as citizens of our country and start advocating that the citizenry demand that the politicians discipline themselves and
Hmm.
ourselves so we
Hmm.
get off this irrational spending binge. A lot of people think it's the people that are the problem in the sense that they continue to demand more government subsistence.
Yeah, this is a very complex topic, and it requires sort of mutually reinforcing solutions, which is what I've tried to do on the website, is to give a comprehensive set of solutions because it's all intertwined. As Winston Churchill said, if you the greatest argument against democracy is having a 5-minute conversation with the average voter, and that highlights one of the weaknesses of democracy is that we have many times only a minority of the electorate voting, and number two, they are not well informed. A lot of times they're voting based on a lot of stupid political ads, whether it be stupid attack ads or ads that completely distort what one or the other stands for. And so we've got to put into place incentives to help voters want to become better informed of the issues. And that's one of the things I proposed that we do. And I've also have proposed some steps to reform our journalism, because robust journalism is to politics what policing is to social order. If you have unreliable, weak policing, criminals will take advantage to operate or to behave with reckless abandon and impunity. And if you have weak, unreliable journalism, politicians will take advantage to lie and emotionally manipulate people with reckless abandon and impunity. They will use it to control the narrative. And that's one of the big problems in our country, is that nobody knows what, quote unquote, the truth is.
Well, I think one place to start on the media is to educate and reveal the fact that much of the media is on the take. They are complicit
Oh, I
because they
agree.
take money from our federal government, like the New York Times, for instance, which has taken millions, and Politico, which took 10, I think the number was 9 million in subscriptions to Politico that were sold to different departments in the federal government, different
Mhm.
individuals, and a subscription was $75,000 to $100,000, and
Mhm.
they totaled up 9 million of them. Twitter,
Mhm.
we learned, took $3.4 million from the FBI to censor and cancel people
Mhm.
who spoke about the COVID vaccine and criticized the narrative,
Mhm.
the government narrative about
Mhm.
the vaccine.
Mhm.
So how about passing a law that, one, any dollar paid to any member of the media has to be published on a federal government website, and two,
Mhm.
has to be disclosed, and two, how about limiting contracts with the media from the federal government? What's the matter with that idea?
I totally agree. What's the basic point? The basic point is, in order for our democracy to function, we need to have a common set of facts that we agree on. And one of the problems with journalism now is that back in the old days, to start say a newspaper, you had to have, it was quite an investment. You had to have a printing press, you had to have reporters, you had to have an advertising department, you had to have a way to distribute the newspapers, or starting a television station to broadcast news, or a radio station. These were big investments. And now anybody with a laptop and a web page can start a quote unquote news site. And so what
Guilty
has
as
happened?
charged.
Yeah. Well, what is the result of that? The result of that
The
is that,
truth.
well, Yeah, the news now is the conventional news business model no longer functions. So what have a lot of our news organizations, quote unquote, news organizations become? They become basically entertainment channels. They become uh, basically people don't listen to these channels to find out facts. They listen to these or watch these shows to be manipulated emotionally in the ways that they like. And so and then we get these sort of information silos or these agree fests, and with it's become this information chaos, and nobody really knows what to believe anymore. And so this is one of the things that I have proposed in this, and based on conversations with lots of different people, is that we start certifying our news organizations and our reporters. For example, if you graduate from college and you have a journalism degree, you will automatically be qualified as a certified journalist. But in addition to that, we'll rate our journalists based on the neutrality of their articles. S fund, which is a fund that government can contribute to, corporations contribute, individuals contribute to. So you don't have their funding dependent on any one organization, be it a corporation, be it a billionaire, be it the government. And so we need this. We need to have our journalists certified and our news organizations certified and graded, just like we certify doctors, lawyers, database engineers, truck drivers. And this is especially important in the age of AI because, for example, John, if somebody makes a fake AI video of you with Jeffrey Epstein or something, how are we going to judge if that's real or not? Well, the question will be, was that published on a certified news site or was it published on Joe Sixpack's?
Well, who's gonna certify the news site, and what will be the criteria, and how do you insulate it from politics? My personal trainer went to a weightlifting competition, a bodybuilders
Mhm,
competition, and he came in second. And his paradigm was that the judges were political and just liked the other guy and had a relationship with him.
mhm,
So
mhm,
politics invades every single thing we do. I had a
yeah,
conversation with my pastor a couple of weeks ago, and he said that the church governance, the
mhm,
the authority over our church,
mhm,
is hugely political, and that they
mhm,
divvy up money based on who their cronies are and who they like and who they don't like. And so it seems that
yeah.
politics is just ever present in everything. How do you insulate from that?
Okay. Okay. Number one is you have an organization like the Society of Professional Journalists, and I'm just showing that as an example. It doesn't have to be that one. An organization that is supported by journalists across the political spectrum, and that could be the certifying organization. But in addition to that, you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have grades. And so, how do you grade or evaluate journalists? Well, you have something like a Rotten Tomatoes
Mm.
model, where you have AI programs, you have professional evaluators, and you give them an overall grade. And if their grade falls below a certain level, they get decertified. And so yeah, you're going to get, just like you do with movies. You get 100 views, you're going to get two or three, 1 star. You're going to get a few 4 star, but you're going to get an average. And so based on that average, your overall grade will change. And if it falls below a certain level, because you're always clearly writing biased articles, or your articles are not well sourced, there could be a whole range, and there should be a whole range of ways to evaluate it, certain variables. But you fall below a certain level, you get decertified. But the higher the grade, the more you can receive from your monthly stipend. And this is especially important in small town journalism, because small town journalism has been dying because it's no longer a viable business. But we need to have small town journalists because they are watchdogs over potential local corruption. We want to have journalism become a career that people can do again and can actually make a living doing. And we want to have it not only in big cities like New York and LA, but in small towns like, Vernal, Utah, for example, where a person can be a journalist, an independent journalist, and they can get their monthly stipend. And if they're writing relevant articles, on local projects, potential local corruption, then and the articles are well written, they get a higher grade. But if they're just writing articles on like Mrs. Smith's cat had kittens type of stuff, that's going to lower the grade because it's not real. I mean, occasional human interest story is important, but if they're always just writing trivial articles, their grade is going to be downgraded. And if it gets downgraded to a certain point, they lose their certification.
I like the idea. I just don't know how you're going to get that news feed evaluated and rated. How you're going to connect those dots. I
Mhm.
think in the movie industry, it's a little bit easier to do because you've got a finite number of movies and you've got a finite number of people who are interested in critiquing movies. I
Right.
just don't know. When the internet first came out and newspapers started going up on the internet, they used to allow comment under their news stories.
Right.
They no longer do that. It's a one-way conversation. There's no way to comment back
Hmm.
publicly. You can write
Right.
a letter to the editor, which is
Hmm.
probably going to go in the circular file more often than not.
Right.
But otherwise, there is no checks and balance on the
Hmm.
media. England, I think, has freed up their libel laws so that you can challenge the media in court more easily there than you can in our country. The libel
Hmm.
laws here are incredibly difficult to um, be able to secure a judgment from. But anyway, what about Elon Musk and the American Party? Did, did you inspire him or did he inspire you? You
Well,
want to
I,
comment on that? What I
yeah, I
just
want to
Go
comment. You
ahead.
see, a lot of this evaluation could actually be automated. You could have multiple independent AI programs. You don't want to have just one AI program. You want to have multiple AI programs, which would evaluate. But that's one of the things AI can do. It can evaluate articles based on how well written they are, how neutral are, how well the sources are, how relevant they are. But you want to have human evaluators too. And so we talk about certified journalists. Well, you want to have two certified evaluators. This could be a real interesting new career. And so, if a journalist feels like their evaluation was unfair, they can contest that. And so, yeah, it
It's an
wouldn't be.
interesting concept. I
Mm,
will grant you,
mm,
and I don't know that we've arrived at the exact right answer, but I think that what you're suggesting is very compelling.
mm,
John Kenneth Galbraith said that for every uh, action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I think it was John Kenneth Galbraith, one of the great. Well, it was an extension of the physicists that came up with that notion
Isaac
first,
Newton's,
but
yes.
then the
Yeah,
economists said that applies in economics as well.
right.
Basically, when you squeeze the water balloon over here, it's going to pop
Hmm.
out over there. And so I do think that there should be, and he called it a countervailing power. I think
Hmm.
what you're suggesting is a countervailing power. And I
Hmm.
think that is a perfectly smart and worthwhile notion. I just don't know who's going to fund it and who's going to manage it, and who's going to govern it. Now, if I'm the one who they select to govern it, then I'm all about it. I volunteer right now, and
Hmm.
I think I do a marvelous job. But
Hmm.
I don't know I trust that role to too many other people just
Yeah,
because of the complexities and the bias that anyone is going to bring to the job. But
yeah.
so now,
Well,
go
Well,
ahead.
I just want to comment that you know, Solutions Party. When I say it's about ideas, and that's exactly what it is. I have posed some ideas on the website. This is an idea that reforming our journalism. It's an idea, but the only real fundamental idea that I think anybody wants to quote unquote join this is that we number one we eliminate reelection because that's what I see as one of the most fundamental problems, and we reform our political parties. But I don't expect everybody to agree with every idea. And as a matter of fact, this is what we want to encourage. We want to encourage a civil exchange of ideas because that's what makes our country great.
I
As
agree.
somebody who's lived in an autocracy, autocracies are the weakest form of government because they number one, it's relies on abusing the tools of government to stay in power, and number two, you don't have a free flow of ideas. And just like we want free competition in the marketplace, we want a free competition of ideas in our politics, and that's what we've got to work toward. Now, you asked me about Elon Musk's
Yes.
America Party.
Who
Okay,
inspired who?
Well, I've had this for a while. Oh, not for a while, but I've been working on this, so I think I came first. But it's okay. I'm not interested in
Ross
taking
Perot
credit.
probably came first, but that's all right.
Yeah, the thing
You were
is,
in the line of
yeah.
succession, which is
Let
great.
let me just say this. I want to make this extremely clear. Politics should never be about a person. Okay, I'm not in this for myself. Politics should always be about ideas. Anybody who says, "Oh, it's got to be me. I'm the only one who can fix it," is a liar. In the final analysis, what we really need to concentrate on are the ideas, the ideals, and the vision, not on personalities. Personalities need to be out of the picture. We've got to focus on the ideas. So that's number one. But getting to Elon Musk and the others, you see, the thing is basically this. Um, George Washington warned about political parties because what happens to political parties is they become institutionalized, which means that the interests of the political party itself starts taking priority. And this is exactly what we have, our politicians putting party above country. And uh, and people are, I think, are sick of our two political parties, and rightfully so. And so, what we want, I believe, is the best of both worlds. We want to have political parties can serve a purpose in they allow people of similar ideas to organize and offer candidates accordingly. But we don't want them to exist so long that they become tribal, they become institutionalized. So that's why I proposed that we put a 12-year limit on political parties. Any political government recognized political party exists for 12 years, then it has to be disbanded. The leaders of the former political party cannot become leaders of the new political party. And this will help, I think, eliminate a lot of the mindless tribalism. I mean, for example, right now we have so many people who say, well, I'll never vote Republican or I'll never vote Democrat. And that's not how it should work at all. We should, tribalism and democracy do not function. And we have this become where people are automatically voting. And let's look at our presidential election. Why is it that a few purple counties and a few purple states matter more than all of California or matter more than all of Texas? It's come, and this is ideal for the politicians because they can put all their resources into skimming off that ever smaller, undecided minority. But our politicians, if we're talking about the presidential election or whatever, should be fighting for every vote in every county, in every state. It shouldn't be, okay, this is the blue ones, we're not even going to try there. These are the red ones, we're not even going to try there, but these are the purple ones. And so we want to get the tribalism out of our politics. And I think one of the ways to do that is to reform the whole nation of political parties and make them only temporary.
Well, I'm totally in favor of change. I'll tell you what my hot buttons are.
Mm-hmm.
It is my firm conclusion that our federal government is rotten to its core. And I, for one, demand answers on JFK, RFK, MLK. We've gotten some documents, we don't have the answers. I'd like to know more about Building 7. And if it was taken down, as I believe that it was, go on YouTube and watch it for yourself. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, I'm talking about Building 7 in the World Trade Center, darkest
Right.
day of our nation's history. I'd like to know who was Ray Epps working for on January the 6th? Who was paying him? All we have to do is subpoena his bank records and bring him before Congress to testify who gave the order to shoot Ashley Babbitt. I really want to know. I want to
Mm-hmm.
know what led up to that. I am also in favor of enforcing existing laws respecting insider trading. The insider trading that Nancy Pelosi and others are guilty of doing in Congress is against our federal law, but there are no repercussions.
Well,
I'd like to
yeah.
know the rest of the Epstein files. I would
Yeah.
like to know what they were looking for in Mar-a-Lago when they raided it. I'd also like to know more about United Flight 23. I don't know if you know anything about it. I just learned about it recently myself. But United Flight 23 was on the ground at JFK. It was a flight to LAX. It had suspicious people in the front cabin. The flight was called back on a ground halt after the two twin towers were assaulted. And the flight attendants and crew on that airplane have an awful lot to say about who those occupants were and the information has been suppressed. It has been kept from the American public. And I'm
Hmm.
sick of it. I'm
Yes.
absolutely sick of it. So I am personally willing to go to any legitimate, lawful, dramatic means of reforming our federal government. I thought Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi and John Ratcliffe would do it. I think they're trying. I think
Hmm.
Tulsi Gabbard is coming closer than anybody, but
Hmm.
you can see how difficult the task is as it is unfolded in a reality type television show right before our very eyes. And we're seeing just how corrupt and just how incestuous the federal government is. And you point to the politicians. I would point to the bureaucrats. I think that if there's evil, that you can find it in the bureaucracy. That's just the world according to John. And what are you going to do about them in your 2 year and 12 year timelines?
Well, yeah, but that's another reason why I propose reforming government employment and getting rid of the notion of lifetime government employment. I say government employment should be limited to 5 years. I mean, there are going to be a few exceptions, obviously, in the military or something like that, but we don't want to have people. If you've ever known anybody who's been a lifetime bureaucrat, for lack of a better word, you know that it really destroys them. I mean, uh, in a government organization, people are pressured, and I've seen this in Japan, I've seen it in Peru, I've seen it in China. People are pressured to conform to the lowest common denominator, and you get turf wars, and you get people who are just interested in securing their career and uh, milking their career. So I propose, let's get rid of the whole notion of lifetime government employment. Let's open up government jobs to college students, giving them that first job that is so critical, and let's give them incentives to find ways to make government more efficient. For example, if a college student joins a certain government department and they find that they suggest that we could save $1 million a year if we did this differently, you give them a commission. You give them incentives to find ways to make things more efficient. And because they don't have they don't have a long-term interest in the organization, they don't have to play the games that our bureaucrats do now. So that's one of the things that I have proposed is that, let's get rid of the whole notion of lifetime government employment. Let's have it more like something like, serving in the military for 2 years.
People like Anthony Fauci and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page come rushing to my mind. Anthony Fauci is clearly a liar. He has been proven to be a liar. His
Mm-hmm.
own emails prove him to be a
Mm-hmm.
dishonest, untruthful person.
Mm-hmm.
Yet he continues to receive a pension and a chauffeur driven automobile, both supplied by the federal government. Peter
Yeah.
Strzok, he was caught with clearly trying to undermine the election of a democratically elected president, i.e., Donald Trump. He was fired by the FBI, sued the FBI, and then they settled with him for $1.2 million. Similarly, put ditto for everything I said about Strzok with Lisa Page. She was settled with for $800,000.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
cesspool of the swamp continues to fester. That's where I think we need to begin. I applaud
Mm-hmm.
your efforts, Evan
Mm-hmm.
Jaqua. I think you're on to the right the right path. I'd certainly like to do what I can to help you. Maybe abolishing the political parties might be a good first step, but you're just trying to create a third one, and Elon Musk a fourth one. I don't know what the solution is, frankly.
Yeah, I don't. You see, the thing is that I don't even think this needs to be an official political party. As long as people buy into the notion of electing candidates who promise to serve only one term and are not going to seek another office while they're currently serving, I think that would be a first step. You've just got to buy into this notion of getting, and so it doesn't have to actually be an effect. Now, I have registered the Sleuths Party as a nonprofit in Oregon. I am going to try and make it an official political party, but that's not actually a prerequisite. The idea is buying into the ideas. Let's start with electing people who are going to go in there because they want to make a difference. They want to make their mark on history, and then they'll move on. It's not they're going to be spending half their time working to get reelected. And that's just a bunch of bull. If you hired somebody a 4-year contract and they spent half the time on the job just lobbying management for an extension of that contract, I don't think you'd be too happy. We want them concentrating on their job 100%, politics out of it. You're not going to get reelected, or you promise to not even seek reelection. And so just concentrate on your job 100% and then move on. As simple as that. Now, regarding pensions, I just want to say one of the good things about limiting government employment to 5 years is you give them one-time severance pay, and there are no long-term pensions. Think of how much money we would save with that. How much money do we spend on our budget just giving these former government employees pensions?
Well, I love the ideas. I hope that we can work all together in this country. I think it's going to have to start with we the people, frankly,
Of
and
course.
we need to come up with better solutions for educating the electorate and give them opportunities to learn the true facts, and then hope that they will invest the time to do just that. Therein lies the problem, I believe. But let's work on that as well. There's solutions to all these problems. Evan Jaqua has his set of solutions, which I think are compelling, novel, and unique, and very good discussion starters. Where do people follow you, and how can we keep up with what you're doing?
Solutionsparty.org is where you'll find the ideas. I'm now on daily on X and Twitter, and also I'm starting to publish TikTok videos, which are basically just commentary.
Yeah.
But I really want to make it clear that this isn't about me. It's not me imposing my ideas on anybody. I want to start a civil exchange of ideas, because that's really what makes our country great. That's what will save us, is when we get the emotions out of the picture and we concentrate on ideas and on facts.
Well, I like it. And if you can figure out how to do it in an entertaining way, I think you'll have a better chance of success.
Well,
We've got 1,300 subscribers on YouTube. We'll have 200,000 listeners on the radio today, and about 6,000 on Getter. Meanwhile, Mr. Beast is back making his videos, and he's got 417 million YouTube subscribers. So we're going to have to make it fun,
well, hey,
Evan, and
fun.
we're going to have to make it interesting.
You've got to see my music videos. Hey,
Well,
I've got.
let's start there. I think that's a good place to begin. Thank you so much for coming on The Truth, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure. You too. Thank you so much. Thank you.